There was a thought that Ohio State would be at full strength at running backs with Mine Williams and TreyVeyon Henderson being a two-headed monster going into the game against Georgia. That's not the case. Henderson is not playing, which makes me wonder what impact will that have on the Ohio State offense without TreyVeyon Henderson in the game against Georgia. We will discuss that and a whole lot more today on Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes, part of Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Friday, December 16th in the year 2022, and today's episode is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. During this episode, we will discuss the impact, or what impact does the offense have without having TreyVeyon Henderson in the college football playoff, and the impact of name, image, and likeness on the recruiting. I see you guys on Twitter. You guys get animated. Well, today, I'm not only going to get animated, but my buddy Jeff Hunt is back with us once again, 2 Fridays in a row. And if there's anybody out there's a lot of people out there I want to discuss these two topics with, but Jeff is on that very, very, very short list of individuals who I want to discuss this stuff with, because I know there are certain things that get Jeff fired up, and one of these two things will get Jeff Hunt saying some things that come across my timeline from his Twitter feed all the time.
Hey, Jay, first of all, it's good to see you, man. Happy holidays. I love being here with you. Things are ramping up. The bowl season starts today. Like your listeners, as we speak, might be watching, the first of the bowl game. So it's an exciting time for college football fans, exciting time for us. It's an emotional time for college football fans. There's so much going on right now. We know that we have expanded playoffs, the NIL, the collectives, so to speak, are taking over, but we also have a current playoff, to look forward to with our Ohio State Buckeyes. I've never had so many branches of focus, going into one of the biggest games in Ohio State history like I have this year. It's exciting. It's anxious times, and it's but it's fun for guys like me and you, man.
It's a lot of fun. Think back to 2014, Jeff, the first year of the playoff.
Oh.
Who does Ohio State play in the semifinal? Alabama. Like, the premier school in college football. They're recently, a few years prior to playing Ohio State, they won 3 national championships in 4 years. Nick Saban had risen to the top of the sport as being the preeminent and premier coach in college football. You're playing down in the South once again. You're playing Georgia in the Peach Bowl. First ever game being played in Atlanta, which is also the first time the Buckeyes are playing in the Peach Bowl. I don't think the Buckeyes have played the Georgia Bulldogs 5 times in the history of these two schools. So there's a lot going into this game. But also, I'm not going to say Kirby Smart is at Nick Saban's level where Saban was in 2014. And I'm not going to say Georgia has done or is the same caliber of team Alabama was back then. But that's a good football team. And we talk about all these branches, from the things we'll talk about today to things that have gone through your head, just in your everyday working mind, things like that. This game's intriguing. But one of the weirdest things I think that got some national attention is the absence of TreyVeyon Henderson, not only in the Peach Bowl, but if the Buckeyes beat the Bulldogs, the national championship will be without TreyVeyon Henderson as well. That's a weird statement to say. But, Jeff, I'm going to come out early and make this statement. Y'all might get mad, but I really don't care. I don't think this Henderson loss is the worst thing in the world for the Ohio State offense.
So we talk about this a lot. This is one of those things that me and you text back and forth with, each week when we're watching the games. We're like, how do we feel about this player? How do we feel about that player? A lot of this, like the same with the Jackson Smith and Jigba thing. I was glad to get it out of the way.
Yes.
And I'm not a detraction guy, but I'm just like, Jay, you played a little bit of football. I played a little less, but we still played the game. And I'm like, let's get these things out of the way and let's focus what's on the field. Like, I don't need to wonder. I don't want to take reps and wonder if that guy is going to all of a sudden be there when we play the game. Like, I want to take reps with the guys that we're playing the game with. And if Henderson's actually hurt, that's fine. Like, I want him to get healed. I don't want him to risk anything. And, I want him to do what's needed to what's best for his, physical being and, in his future. But I also want to move on with stuff. To the same way with, I think one of the biggest mistakes, that Day made through the season, we've discussed it. I don't know. You don't know, whatever, Njigba's health was through the year. I would have rather known week 4, like, not coming back, not going to play, not going to have him. Let's move on, rather than get to this point, get to the point of the season we did with him. Same with Henderson. There was times where I was like, Henderson's injured. He needs to, not be playing in this game. Then we kind of drug this out. And then all of a sudden it got announced at a weird time. The first thing that, I put out there was like, well, this is probably the last time we probably won't see him in a Buckeye uniform again. That is completely me, jumping off the bridge. I have absolutely no inside sources on any of this. He just, for whatever reason, this transfer portal error, he feels like a guy that's going, but I don't want to get into that. That's not what the show's about. But I am at least relieved that I want him to be healthy. And I also want this team to move forward with the guys that are going to be on the field. I'm an on the field guy. That's how football is. It's cruel. It's no disrespect to him or his family or any of that, but we got to move on with who's going to play this game and have a game plan based on their abilities.
Jeff, you make an interesting comment about getting this announcement out there where he's saying he's not going to play him and Njigba because it gives you want to be able to practice with the guys that are going to be playing. And you mentioned how in the season it was really maybe weird, oddly mishandled. Some say poorly mishandled. It never really made sense. I understand not wanting to make public the medical status of student athletes. NCAA, I want to make that statement for you, the student athlete part. But also, I mean, you're kind of doing sometimes maybe not even yourself, not even saying the individual player that's hurt. What about the teammates who might get questions? Hey, is TreyVeyon Henderson going to be healthy, or is Njigba coming back, or is so and so? Like, they're having to get questions asked to them because in the Ryan Day's press conference, nothing's being said and there's no definitive statement. So and so is out 4 weeks or 8 weeks or for the season. It does really hurt the team, but it does kind of help the team right now, as not only do they know who's going to play against Georgia, everybody knows who's going to play against Georgia. The Njigba thing's one absence that I think many people could have predicted. Yeah. It would have also made a whole lot of sense if he was going to play. That might be the new age opt out. I have no idea. So guys, don't be like, Jason and Njigba opted out. Well, technically he kind of did, but he's also hurt. Like, he has not played in like 5, 6, 7 weeks. So that's not really like it could be a medical opt out. Like, hey, I'm medically opting out of the rest of the season because I cannot play football. Like, that's a legit thing. When it comes to Henderson, if I'm a guy like Dallin Hayden or Chip Trainum or even Mayan Williams, I know who I'm riding with in this game. And that, as an offense in the running back room, that gives me confidence. But also for Stroud, it knows how he could better prepare the entire offense for what the offense can do against the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, well, and to piggyback on that, that's exactly what I like. When you're in that film room, I don't need the 3 running backs, because let's face it, if you're in that room, you're playing with these guys, I'm sure that Henderson could have took reps against air, and been fine and done all the walkthroughs. So now you're wasting all these reps and Day, and I think he was guilty of this a lot of the season, of building the game plan based on players that weren't going to play. Like, I honestly think he coached, as if Njigba was going to come back every week for probably like 6 or 7 weeks before he was finally like, okay, we need to focus on Egbuka's going to be here. Fleming's going to be here. We're going to start putting these guys, we got to start moving, Henderson around a little bit, ironically. And I didn't want him to do that with Henderson in the running back role. wasting these reps for these guys. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, Hayden, you're in. And I think that was a huge mistake going into the Michigan game. I think they wasted reps and so on and so forth. And I know that, he was out early in that, but like, I felt like he needs to game plan for his talent, not the position. And, that's a critique on Day that he did all season. But he's adjusted in the past with that. And he needs to do it again. I think Henderson needs to be like, I'm out. You guys go. I'm here for you. When you come to the sideline, like, I'll tell you what I saw. I'll give you any tips that I have. But I'm not going to be in the game. You are. I'm gonna do everything I can, to support you and help you go. Kind of like, I know it's an extreme, but kind of like Olave did, like, say, last year going into the Rose Bowl. Like, I'm not playing, but I want to help you in any way I can without being on the field. Nothing wrong with that. It just needs to be upfront. We need to talk about it. And I think this was the first time that maybe this was handled, better than it could have been.
I'm right there with you, Jeff. Let's think about this. Ohio State has a new playing surface on the field this year. They got rid of the turf last year. Everybody complained about. But the first year with a new turf field, it's going to be a little slick. It's not real grass. You might have some slippage, but also, which is something I've recently learned, there's different types of artificial turf that teams can use. And a listener of this podcast, I don't know if it's audio or video on YouTube. I'm not really sure which avenue they consume the podcast on a daily basis. But they asked me if I've heard anything about the playing surface at Ohio State and if that is a cause for the injuries, the lower leg injuries, the slipping that might not cause an injuries of the players this year. At the time, I had not heard anything. I hadn't even crossed my mind because remember, like, this brand of artificial turf is new. Like,
brand new.
It's brand new, so you're not really getting something that's been there for 50 years. You have all the answers. No, teams are doing things now that they have never done before. But then I remember seeing a tweet, and it's very pertinent to this situation because Henderson suffered a lower body injury. And the tweet said that I believe it was the NFLPA is trying to discuss ways to get colleges to get away from the type of field turf Ohio State currently has, which makes me wonder, does the type of surface play into the types of lower leg injuries or lower body injuries that people are suffering right now? Do you think?
It certainly does. And when I say it certainly does, that doesn't mean that I'm saying that Ohio State's turf is causing injuries, but the surface you play on absolutely has an effect on how you play. Like, I'm one of your older listeners, Jay, one of your older, guests. I remember when basically teams in the 80s and 90s were playing on carpet over asphalt.
Jeff, the Colts used to play on that stupid stuff, and I remember seeing my cousin who played high school football in Northern Indiana. He used to come down to Indianapolis for the state championship. I loved it for him. He got a new pair of Jordans, and I'm like, hey, bro, you got new shoes, new J's?
Great. That was a big deal.
Y'all say J's. Yes, this is literal carpet, and you played wearing tennis shoes, gym shoes. You weren't playing wearing cleats. And so that alone was different for you. You play all year in grass and the elements and all this stuff, and then you come down and in the state championship, RCA Dome, you're wearing gym shoes. That's a different type of playing surface and different footwear for you. But yes, the old carpet stuff, guys, it was horrible. Sorry, Jeff, had to get that out.
No, that's a great story because I remember that too. That was the biggest deal. It's like, but as a player, you were like, oh man, I hope we get a play on turf because you didn't know what it felt like. All you saw was that you saw it on TV. You knew it wasn't as muddy as your practice field out back that you had been on for 5 months training for this thing. But then like the biggest thing then was like when you landed, it was harder. That was hard on you. Like there's so many stories of injuries over the years. So this surface does have an effect, and we've saw it a lot in the NFL this year. Like, OBJ is a big one for tweeting every time somebody gets hurt, like get rid of this turf. And though he can, sometimes, want to be out there and make a star of himself, I'm not going to discredit somebody who's played in the NFL as long as he has had the injuries. So I honestly can't sit here and say like, oh no, that's ridiculous. Now I remember when my son, he played on grass for years. His team put the turf field in. I remember being on the turf and everybody being like, this is awesome. It was a wonderful thing. But to what you're saying is there a line to where like, well, okay, this turf is better than this turf, and this turf is, this is what you want. So I do think, I think it's something to look into. The conversation needs to be had, because if you have a team that has whatever, for instance, the Baltimore Ravens, my wife's a Baltimore Ravens fan. We watch them every week. They go through an exorbitant amount of injuries over the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a coincidence? It could be, but why wouldn't you look at the surface that they practice on and that they play on to make sure that that's not a factor in it? Because Ohio State is absolutely a school that can afford to switch turfs if they just chose wrong. Sometimes you swallow your pride and you're like, this isn't right, because Njigba got hurt game 1 on the new turf, and it ended the season.
I'm pretty sure Henderson's injury happened at Ohio State on the same surface that Njigba got hurt on. Yeah. Think about this though, Jeff. This conversation could go on for hours. Trust me, we could talk about surfaces.
That's a good. I like that though. That's a good fire starter that you just put out there for the world to think about. I listen to a lot of podcasts, Jay, and they don't always bring this up, but that's a very that's a great conversation for people to have around the water cooler, so to speak, and and go down that road.
Here is a conversation and a topic that I don't know. I know it can't happen at a lot of universities. I think the enforcement of it would be really, really hard in college football, as there is no governing body. Well, the NCAA kind of governs some things. I just don't think they would govern it and make this decision. But I think there should be a conversation to be had behind closed doors between all the conference commissioners and those people that are at the head of, say, hey, you're the commissioner of football for the Big Ten or commissioner of basketball for the SEC. I think all those people, head of football for the conference, the commissioner for the conference, they need to sit in the room and discuss, should we force everybody to have one playing surface? The NFL does not do that, but the NFL also does ban certain types of artificial turfs. I'm a believer. I know people don't like this. I know it's not great for the eyeballs on TV, mud games, rain, all that stuff. But I'm starting to believe, Jeff, playing on grass is safer than playing on turf. I never thought I would say that. I still think the body, we don't hear about all these things happening with kids playing on the grass and saying, oh, so-and-so had this or so-and-so had that. But I still think that playing on grass might be a safer bet for the human body than playing on the artificial surfaces, because the artificial surfaces, they have a cap. And that stuff is hard. It's hard at times. I don't know if it's ever going to be enforced, but I would love for there to be hey, this is acceptable. This is not acceptable. We have banned that old carpet that people used to play on. Great. Well, How about we ban some more of the new age artificial turfs to protect the bodies of the college athlete that we love watching every single Saturday, bowl games like we're going to watch today, and a plethora of them on Saturday. Playing on grass, I love it. I love seeing the grass stains. I'm still that kind of guy. I know the turf is better for the viewing pleasure, but Jeff, I would not be surprised or even upset if at some point they said, hey, we got to start banning some of this turf. And if it becomes to the point where grass needs to be put back in, schools will hate it. But hey, safety first, right? And I think protecting the player's safety needs to be at the forefront of a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, and we're also in the age of better athletes, better training, more muscles. I mean, we watched Kyler Murray get hurt the other night.
Yeah, man.
That could have happened to him walking down the mall. He could have been going to Bed Bath & Beyond and done that. So there's also some of that. We don't, just like you say, Jay, our whole thing is here tonight. The theme is discussion. We are not saying go one way or the other. We're saying discuss things. If there's a turf that's a little better, go ahead and go with that instead of this. We're, me and Jay Stevens are sitting here telling you nope, everybody's playing on mud. Because I also remember when teams like the Cleveland Browns were famous for decades. Their grass field, quote unquote, was painted dirt. That wasn't good either. So that was also but let's have the discussion. There's fields out, there's indoor grass fields now. That's a great option. If you look at the World Cup, not the one being played now in Qatar, but when it's played in North America, a lot of indoor stadiums with natural grass field, they don't play on turf. So all we're asking is let's have the discussion. Let's look at the information we have. Let's have the discussion. Let's talk to the players. Let's ask them what they think. Let's ask OBJ his opinion. If it's off the wall and there's no basis for it, fine. But have these discussions instead of just being this is what the most money maker is. And this is what gets I'm sure Ryan Day loves the speed of his turf when he's putting up 700 yards a game. These are things that factor into it.
I'm right there with you. Discussion. It's a great word to describe what's going to happen next. Because many of you that know when Jeff comes on the show, there are 3, sometimes 4 topics, but that can be kind of hard for Jeff and I who can get a little long-winded. So I made it a little bit shorter today. Went longer on the Henderson conversation than normal, but I didn't want to stop and derail that thing. That thing was flowing so well. I wanted to just allow Jeff and I a little bit more time to discuss that. But name, image, and likeness. Many of you know it shortly as NIL. It's a topic that's not going away. It's a topic that was thrust on us in 2020 in the midst of the COVID, the pandemic, and ultimately what happened. The NIL was there. The NCAA instituted the transfer portal, and coaches in a world where they're trying to literally figure out how in the world they can manage their rosters, knowing that they have players that have an extra year of eligibility. All of a sudden, it's now maybe it was 2021 when it all came out. My years and numbers are all jumbled up. But now you have players who can legally, and I'm going to use a word nobody really wants to use, legally sign endorsement deals, which is what they're supposed to be. Hey, an appearance, hey, you want to sell something for me, whatever it is, you provide a service, we give you money. That's what NIL is. But it's being used as a tool in recruiting. Money has always been used as a tool in recruiting. This is just a way that it can be done, and with the rules that are there, that they're not being enforced, ultimately, the boosters, LSU, Miami, Georgia, the schools in the South, there's a reason why some of them are flourishing right now with the recruiting. And so with the NIL stuff, I don't really talk about it, Jeff, much on the show, because I could do it daily. I think people will get kind of bored with it.
Yeah.
But I do think, though, the NIL conversation with Ohio State is interesting because some people say Ohio State is behind in the NIL space. But, Jeff, I also go to the recruiting rankings, which I don't really put much stock in, but I do understand there's a grading system there. If Ohio State's really failing in the recruiting, the numbers don't tell me that from the people that cover this stuff and have their own PFF-style grade for the recruiting. So am I missing something? Is Ohio State behind in the NIL and the recruiting, or is the conversation, the narrative out there, is that a little false? I don't know. I'm kind of confused as to what's going on right now.
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of both. Is Ohio State behind in, like you said it precisely, are they behind in what we call, what they're referring to as the NIL, but really we're talking about collectives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest difference in college football. Collectives are, and I'm not trying to talk down to your, listeners and your viewers, Jay, but just for anybody who doesn't care about the stuff, like I don't care about the stuff. I pay attention to it and I listen to it and I talk about it, but I don't love the NIL stuff. I love the X's and O's stuff. Jay knows that. But what we're talking about here is collectives are essentially a subscription to your football team. You get as many people to donate as much money as you can, and you pull that money together, and then somebody decides how to dish it out to recruits and call it endorsements or whatever. I don't know the details of how they really write that up as far as what the recruit does for that money, but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a pool of money, and we're talking about dishing it out to players and trying to keep them. And this is essentially what the most famous one is what Texas A&M did last year. And then there's the other side of the coin. Texas A&M is not going to a bowl game this year. So it also doesn't immediately translate into wins. They've got players transferring. Again, not holding anything. I personally think the transfer portal has a bigger effect on college football than anything else I've ever seen in my lifetime. But the NIL is where is this gray area to where, I think recently, like you brought it up, like Zach Smith is trying to head, this big NIL collective. Our friend Mo Murphy is partnering with one. I'm not against any of that. I'm glad the players are finally getting to take some of this, but now you've got, how are we manipulating it? How are we really turning it into? And the biggest conversation we had before the show started, again, the universities aren't paying any money. The colleges aren't giving up any money. They really have a middleman, and they have a passionate fan base, which Ohio State, I mean, is unlimited fan base. So like in theory, their collective is going to be giant, Jay. Like it's just going to happen. It may not be Jay Stevens, it may not be, Jeff Hunt, donating the money, but if millions and millions and millions of Ohio State fans are throwing 10, $20 at it, that pot's going to get huge to dish out to these recruits. And so my biggest thing my thought is now what it's changed the most is now, like, if you're Ryan Day, you have to be in a player's house and you have to be, trying to convince him to come to Ohio State like you always did. But now all of a sudden, when that player legally asks, okay, what can I make? Now Ryan Day, because the university's not paying the money, he has to call a third party and say, hey man, I think I've got this guy 90% there. What can we do for him? That's what's changed the most. And and I don't think these coaches want to do that. I think it's too much to ask for them, but that is literally what we're doing now. The coach has to recruit and be a negotiator, which is really weird. And then you have the questions of like, okay, now what does the player owe you? And what's the contract? Like all these things, it's when Quinn Ewers, signed that a year or so ago to sell iced tea, we thought it was cute. Like, that made sense. That's what we thought the NIL was. And now it's a different animal. And now it's players. I saw the other day a big time recruiter said the biggest question now is about the NIL, not about the offense, not about the defense, not about the practice facilities. It's about how, what can you offer me? I'm not holding this against the players. I'm just telling you that's where we're at.
Well, I believe I saw on Twitter former Ohio State tight end Ben Hartsock. He's on SiriusXM College, and he said he's talking to guys that cover recruiting weekly, hosting radio shows, and he talks to those. They have these conversations, and he's saying all of them are saying the number one conversation is NIL. Now, maybe for years and decades, there were certain athletes. I can't say every athlete. There were certain athletes that could go in a recruiting visit and say, what can you do for me financially? Those conversations could not be put out there. Like, I heard Fred Taylor say he was on a visit to a school in the South, and there was a bag of money for him at the visit. It was not millions of dollars, but it was a lot of money to not just him at the time, to a lot of people. But he did not go to that school, but he said, hey, yeah, there was X amount of dollars here and this. And this was back in the 90s?
Fred Taylor in the early 90s, yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, that's back then, and money has inflated. Pocketbooks have inflated. The money in college sports has inflated. And so, the money that he could get now on that same visit could be a whole lot more. The NIL thing is weird. The collectives, I think, is an interesting thing. It can be used. It can help and aid recruiting. But also, Jeff, one thing you don't really hear about around Ohio State much is the bag man. I know in college basketball they have the shoe guy, I know Dan Dockich, many people don't like his commentating, but I remember him talking about how the shoe guy in college basketball is very, very important and very weird at AAU events. He's just there. Hey man, repping Adidas. Got this for you. Come to X school, and his whole purpose is to get you as he represents this brand, this shoe brand, which represents this university. Hey, go out there, go to this school. I got X for you. X is a whole lot of money. It's weird that we're here in this space now where what was once kept hush-hush is now being put on Front Street. And, Jeff, you mentioned Quinn Ewers. We will not see the details of that contract, and I don't know if they're legally obligated to not expose those. We see details of contracts of coaches, and we know how much money coaches are making, and stipulations and buyouts and this and that. We see all those things with coaches. I wonder, Jeff, if at some point, 10, 20 years down the road, there's a 30 for 30 on the start of the NIL era, and it comes out, there were no contracts being signed. Like, a lot of the stuff was being done behind closed doors, under the table. And what we thought was, hey, it's being utilized properly in all these places with no guardrails and no rules. Ultimately, it wasn't. It was simply the same old bagman trying to be disguised in a legal way. And all of a sudden, that bagman is now doing things and shelling out a whole lot more money, but doing it with the help of boosters now that can tap into their own businesses to dump in money. I don't know, man. It's a crazy conversation, but Jeff, it's 2022. newly into this thing. The playoffs going to expand soon. Conferences are expanding. I expect the TV deals for the CFP to expand, to add CBS and NBC and Fox into the fold. What does all that mean? More money. And Jeff, you said it earlier. You said it pre-show. I'm going to make the statement for you once again. The schools are still not paying athletes. Think about a business where somebody can tap into another source of income, another avenue of money, and say, hey, I got 15 employees. Give me $1 million and pay them. And then they're using that money where the business is not paying the athletes at all. I don't know if NIL is going to push the schools to pay the athletes any sooner.
Nope.
Because they don't need to. Schools are in this to make money. Education, yes. They're in this to make money. That's why tuition is so high, room and board is so high, all this stuff. I don't know, man. Like, NIL is a crazy thing. And,
I think you said.
I don't know what's going to happen next.
I think you said it best. The early years, we're going to, 30 years from now, they're going to look back at the early years of the NIL and be like, wow, that was crazy. And what I would say is, and I'm using A&M as an example because they were the biggest NIL example that didn't succeed this year. How many
you
years?
forgot about the Miami Hurricanes.
Well,
no. A&M used the portal a lot more than Miami did.
But either one, how many years can they do this and not go to the playoffs before everything pans out? That's what we don't know yet because we're so early on into it. Like, and that's why teams like, and it benefits us, Jay. I hate to say it. That's why teams like Ohio State, Alabama, USC, we're going to come through this because we have the most fans. If it becomes a subscription thing, it is what it is. If you got more fans, you're going to have more money in the pot. Everything's going to even out. And then unfortunately, the blue bloods are going to wind up at the top again. Like, I know everybody thinks this equals it out now. The transfer portal equals stuff out. That's a different discussion. But this NIL thing, my prediction is in 5 to 6 years, all of a sudden you're like, oh, great. The 10 richest teams are now the 10 richest teams again. And here we are, but luckily the playoffs expanded and that helps some of it. But it would be very interesting to see the Miamis, the A&Ms, how they come through this in 4 years after they've had a class of, a couple classes of kids go through. How does it go compared to, like, say, Ohio State or Clemson? Clemson's a great example that have been the most resistant, as far as the blue bloods on this. It's going to be fascinating.
Let's not forget Oregon, because, Jeff, I have heard there are rumors that Oregon and Washington, of course, this is like going back into like beginning of the season, those two schools could also leave the Pac-12 to join the Big Ten. Oregon has Nike money. Nike money is like Jordan money. Yeah, it's different. It's different. I say like Jordan money, but Jordan is a branch of Nike. So that just let you know how much money Nike has. If Oregon comes to the Big Ten, and they bring that Phil Knight money, that Nike money with them, that's a game changer, man. Because there are people out there that believe they're buying recruits just like other schools are. I have no sources. I don't know. So don't go out there and say Jay has no idea. But if that's the case, Jeff, want to end it with this: if Oregon's out there buying athletes for football, and if they join a conference that's known for basketball, woo-wee, buddy. Man, talk about it's all about the Benjamins. Man, they could buy them a national championship winning basketball team. I'm going to end it with that, Jeff. This is fun. Went a little bit longer, but I love this stuff, man. I love talking shop. It's weird, man. We're like, it's the second full week after conference championship week, and we've barely broke down the game against Georgia.
Yeah, it's time. I think after this week, it's time I need to really start focusing on this game.
I'm with you, Jeff. I really need to start focusing on finalizing my Christmas shopping as well. I keep telling everybody on the show, hey, enjoy your Christmas shopping. Enjoy the weather. The weather sucks, but hey, enjoy the weather. Ultimately, I need to finish my Christmas shopping, and I need to do that really, really soon, trying to get that done this weekend. Jeff, out of here. We talk a lot. I enjoy this. Where can everybody find you on Twitter so they can find some of your amazing hot takes?
Yeah, hey, I'm at JHunt006. I still, I don't do my show like I used to, but I still do a lot of guest appearances and stuff. I love to interact with you there. I love being on Locked On Buckeyes. I appreciate it each and every time. It's a highlight, to do it, and I'm very thankful for Jay and them to have me on. So yeah, just keep up with me on Twitter, and I bump around here and there. You never know. I may show up doing a movie archive show, or I may show up, I'll do some NBA basketball. I'll do anything. So I appreciate everybody, and thanks for having me on, Jay, and happy holidays to everyone out there in the Locked On Buckeyes world.
Happy holidays, everyone. You can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. I appreciate Jeff coming back on. I appreciate all of you for watching via YouTube or even listening via the audio podcast platform of your choosing. I greatly appreciate it. September was a record month for the podcast, most views in the history of the podcast. I've seen the audio downloads right now for this month at the time of this recording. The numbers are up. They keep going up. It's a testament to you. This is December. It's Christmas time. It's shopping season. And you know what? Buckeye fans are still thirsty for their Buckeye football, and I love every second of it. Out of here on this Friday, a feel-good Friday. We'll be back Monday, and as Jeff said, it's time to start preparing for the game against Georgia. We will do that, talk more Ohio State football-specific game plan stuff starting next week right here. Don't miss it. Got a lot to talk about when it comes to your favorite team, the Ohio State Buckeyes.